Hi guys, welcome to another Facehammer Worldwide interview, and we're joined by the excellent Oscar Lars. And yeah, it's Friday night. We've all been drinking a little bit, and we're here to talk about Age of Sigmar hobby and all the good stuff that comes along with it. So, firstly, thank you very much for coming on, Oscar, and spending your time and coming on the show. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, massively appreciate it,
Thank
mate.
you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on.
It's amazing, dude.
We're really pleased you could make it. We weren't sure when we put the feelers out for the show how many people would get involved, and for us we normally run the Facehammer GT this weekend, and it's been really good that we've had a really good engagement from the community, and just want to say thanks to people watching. We'll try and put these videos up on YouTube as well, so if you haven't already, Oscar's got an amazing channel, so you should definitely check that out, and he's probably got a much bigger audience than us, so come and check us out as well if you're on that. But anyway, it's poaching those people. No. So why don't we start off, Oscar? Why don't you just give us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the hobby and all that sort of stuff, and give us a bit of a background other than being awesome.
Oh well, that's a good introduction, I guess. I'm a full-time commission painter. I've been painting Warhammer for over 2 decades now. Started very, very young and just never quit. I studied art, so I have a bachelor's in fine art, specifically in painting. So I have a little bit more of a background. I like to paint paintings, but in general, I'm also an Age of Sigmar player. I'm a huge fan of fantasy. So when the Age of Sigmar kind of dropped and they weren't doing blocks, which I were never really a fan of, I got very excited. Now I get to play with the cool models and a good game system. And of late, I've also gotten into Necromunda.
Me too.
Cool. Yeah, I say Russ loves Necromunda. Yeah, really likes that. So.
It's really interesting. So me and like Terry's been commission painting for a while. Byron used to commission paint back in the day, and me and Les have embarked on that journey. How have you been doing that a long time? Has that been a difficult transition, and did you do that full time, I assume?
Yeah, so I started commission painting on the side in 2008. So it's been about 12 years now, yeah, and
Wow.
and even so before then, but I wouldn't consider that because that was just to my friends,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But more to people outside of my friend zone. I started painting for in 2008, and once I moved over to the United States, I got approached by the guys over at Frontline Gaming. I met them in person at a tournament. They asked if I wanted to do some commission work, and so I started doing some commission work for Frontline Gaming, and then once I moved over to the other side of the coast, to the East Coast, I finished up my degree and I started my own painting studio, Oscar Lars Painting Studio.
Yeah, amazing. And how do you find painting for a living? You're obviously interested in art. You've obviously done that as your kind of higher education. Is the miniature painting more your thing? Because a good friend of mine, he's a 2D painter, is how I would describe.
Yeah.
And he tried to get into the gaming group that I have with my mates, and he didn't have any knowledge of wargaming at all. And he said that he just couldn't paint 3-dimensional models. He found it completely alien and kind of stressful. And is that when you did your art, were you kind of doing a lot of 2D stuff, or were you working in acrylics? Were you doing oils? I mean, how did you end up thinking, yeah, this is what I want to do for a career?
Yeah, so I think it was a little bit of backwards to your friend there for me. I started painting Warhammer when I was about 6-7 years old. So I started painting 3D, and then I also at the same time started learning how to paint 2-dimensional art, to draw and all that stuff. And my high school that I went to, which was back in Sweden where I'm from, was tailored to an aesthetic kind of background. So you did a lot of music and a lot of painting and a lot of art and woodworking, carpentry and things like that. So I think for me it was something where I didn't expect miniature commission painting to be the thing that I would do. I always kind of had an idea to do 2-dimensional art for a living. But I think once I got into that world and started, studying at a higher level, you you start engaging with people in that community, and you start to see, the community from the inside rather from the outside, which you oftentimes do when you're not in it, or when you're just doing your basic studying. And I didn't like it. It wasn't something that I felt comfortable with. The way that the organizations and the companies and the universities are working isn't really what I want to be doing. So I had to kind of rethink once I graduated what it was that I wanted to do. And I've been painting for over 20 years by the time that rolled around, and I thought, no, I haven't grown tired yet, so why not just continue doing it?
I think if it's in your blood, it's in your blood, right? I mean, I don't know if that's. I think everyone watching this, listening to this, and on this can say that we're basically addicts, right? I mean, like, we wouldn't be here at this age doing it if we weren't like hopelessly addicted to this wonderful thing, which is is great. I mean, it's interesting. Did you find when you started commission painting and being like trying to be self-motivated and things like that, did you find that difficult? Because I know it's, for me, because I'm going from working in an office and doing project management, going from that to doing self-motivated, like creative, but on a not necessarily what you want to do, but you're doing it when you're not necessarily in the mood. How difficult and what do you do to motivate yourself when you I need to paint, but I today I just really don't want to?
I think that's when your hobby becomes your work, I think it transforms into what any job really is, and that is, it's a sense of responsibility that you take on as a business owner, as an employee, or whatever kind of title that you hold. And that is directed towards your clients or your coworkers or your team or however you work. When I come into the studios on days when I don't feel in the zone, I try to, think, if I'm not in the mood or I don't feel like when I'm painting that it's going in the direction that I feel like it needs to go, I don't feel maybe motivated to do painting, and I feel like it's slipping away. The brush handling is not on point, and I don't feel like it's coming out the way that I want it to. I try to reshape maybe what it is that I'm doing. Maybe that's the day where I'm starting to knock out these 100 bases that I need to do, and essentially I'm just dry brushing all day, or I am doing some sculpting, or I take on maybe it's that I don't feel passionate this particular day to do the project that I'm working on. Sometimes I just take my personal day that day and work on my projects, and I substitute that day on another weekend or something like that, and go in on a Saturday and continue to work on my client's project. So there's a couple of strategies that I guess I try to do, but I think overall there are days when you go in and you have no choice. You just have one thing that you got to do, and you got to just do it, and that's the
work,
discipline, right? That you have to have. That's
if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right?
No,
that's right.
I think it's very interesting. I think it's very interesting when you said about like when you're not in the zone, your brush control when, because I get like that. I'm very sort of like the way I highlight stuff. If I'm not feeling it, if I'm not motivated to do that, then like my highlights become super sloppy. I find that I spend twice as long doing something that I would normally do. And like yourself, it's just a case of like, right, I'm not in the zone. I can't highlight these 27 gun barrels. So I'm just going to stop doing that and just black line, just blocking colors. Or like just take a day. And like, that's when I painted that Cathlar. Me and Russ were talking. I was just like, I just can't do it today. I just cannot get motivated to do any more of this project that I'm working on. And he was like, just paint the Cathlar. And then I took that day, and then I'll just make up the time like elsewhere. Luckily I'm quite like, me and Russ approach the painting stuff a little bit differently. Like I'll start early in the morning and then finish in the evening, whereas Russ will start later and work into the night, because like I'm a morning person, like as in like the way I approach it, I'm up about early, and whereas Russ is like more of a night owl. And it's I think that's the really good thing about being a self-employed sort of like commission painter, is that you can have that flexibility as long as you get the job done, like you were saying, for your for your clients and stuff.
That's right.
So
it's also nice to be able to take that personal day for other things too. There's I was saying earlier, sometimes you have something come up, or something's gone wrong with a house, or there's a 3-time weekend where you have an opportunity, not in 2020 maybe, but to go and grab, go to the beach or whatever. And as a self-employed, as long as you make up the time, you keep your schedule, and you keep that promise to your clients, you can kind of do whatever you want.
Facehammer objective markers are available for pre-order now. Click the link in the description below and order them from Element Games.
One of the things, me and Les talk a lot every day, and we're kind of going to get sick of each other, I guess, at some point, but it hasn't happened yet.
More so I get sick of you.
Yeah, mostly, but that's like everyone, right? But anyway, we talk about... one of our favourite authors is Brandon Sanderson, and he does, I know Les has watched his seminars on how to write and do creative writing, and he tends to break the day into 4-hour chunks of creativity, and he knows the first hour is going to be getting in the zone and all that. Then you have 2 hours of super productivity where you do not want to be interrupted, and then you've got the wind down at the end, and then he almost has a 4-hour chunk, steps away, does something else, comes back and has another 4-hour chunk. Do you have you've mentioned going to a studio, so I guess you've got a separate space for work and a separate space for personal. And maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but really what I want to ask you is, how do you break your day up? Do you go I could do 8 hours in the studio, and if you paint your personal stuff, you go to a different place to paint, and you've got completely separate hobby environments? Or do you just, it's personal and commission is in the same place, but it's just painting?
Yeah, my studio is the place where I work both on my personal project and my business stuff. I mean, it's all a bit of a mishmash at this point, because as you guys know, we do these tutorial videos, which is we don't get paid for that, so no. It's not really work. It's just something that we, both Kramer and I, are trying to give back to the community. And allow for people to essentially come in and use free-to-use sources. And I know a lot of other painters are kind of on that track too, where it's giving back. And I think now in 2020 it's more so than ever. But no, I don't separate necessarily my personal painting space and my professional painting space.
And do you find your personal projects suffer because you work as a professional painter, that you think, well, actually, this is just more money I could be earning? And your stuff kind of, you produce some incredible stuff. I had the pleasure of playing you at Warhammer World and seeing your Stormcast close up. So obviously you've produced some amazing stuff, and I think some of your entries in the competition this weekend are going to be pretty mind blowing. I love that Nurgle army. It's Nurgle, so I love it anyway, but it's amazing. Do you find that your personal projects kind of suffer, or you do less than what you want to do? Or do you feel that, because I find some of the stuff that I get as a commission, and I've only just started, so I can't talk too in depth about it, is stuff I would never ever paint, right? But it kind of scratches an itch that I would do in my personal hobby, so then I can really focus my personal on what I really want to do.
I mean, to some extent, I think when your hobby becomes your work, it instantaneously suffers from it. Your personal work definitely takes a hit, because not only are you doing 40-hour weeks of painting, and if you are, oftentimes that becomes 60, because you just need to get things done, and you don't get paid until the project's done, you know what I mean? So it's there's a little bit of pressure to not just keep the schedule and make sure that everybody gets in on time, but it also is to make sure that you get the money so you can pay your rent and put food on the table and all that stuff. But, it's always one of those things that when you're personal hobby, before you really kind of get in, I remember how it was for me before, when I just got a couple of commissions here and there, it was always like, I want more. But now that,
I want less.
Yeah, but that's kind of what it is, because now I want my time for my miniatures that I want to paint in my Necromunda board and put all that in. But, to some extent, after you put in 8 hours into your client's commission, and then, that little extra hour, what I try to do essentially is I go into work, I start off my morning, I go in half an hour earlier and then leave a half an hour later on my days. And those are essentially my block of personal time that I decided to add very recently, where I go in and I start off the day by just getting into something that feels right for me to paint at that moment. And at this time, I've been painting Cal Jericho, which is an audiobook that I finished quite recently, and I was just, oh man, I fell in love with his character. He's so amazing. But yeah, so I decided to paint him. So that's what I've been doing. The first 20 minutes I get in, I just pick a detail. I'll pick a little pouch or something, and I paint that. And then at the end of the day, I do the same thing. I paint a little bit on Cal Jericho or whatever project I have. And that kind of means that I have this middle span that I'm still doing what I love. And this Sisters of Battle Army has been a really fun project. So I work on clients' products. At the end of the day, I get that little treat that I can always remember from earlier this morning that I get to work on a little bit more before I come home and start thinking about dinner and whatever projects and entertainment we're going to do for that day. So that's kind of how I try to structure mine.
That's brilliant. That's a really, really good idea, because I know personally, and like, I'm sure Russ and Terry will both sort of like say the same thing, is that my personal hobby, since becoming a commission painter in July, like the only thing I've painted for myself was that Cathlar, and I gave myself like 6 hours the other day to do it. But just having those little bits to chip away on, where you've got, right, here's the unit that I'm going to chip away on, and just go, I just have 30 minutes before I start, and then you're almost enthused then, because you're working on something for yourself because you love it, and then you go, right, well, I'm enthused, I'm all fired up for the day. Let's work on the customer stuff, the clients. You work through that, and then reward yourself in the evening. So that's really, like, that's something I would never have thought of. It's really, really interesting. It's something I may take up and like completely
You're
rip
never
off
going
and
to have
do
got enough either, are you? Because the sessions are so small, you'll always be like, you'll always be keen for it, and you can never get sick. Because if you are literally painting like his shoe or whatever, then you're always left wanting more, which is a really positive thing to be able to do to yourself.
Yeah, it's a really interesting,
really good
take. So,
really good idea.
Do you? What's your kind of like your get in the zone type thing? Did you have like a playlist, like a Spotify playlist that's like gets you hyped? Or because I know like Les's thing is getting to the gym, going to the gym, having a workout, coming back, being like feeling like you started the day right, whereas I'm more like sleep to 11, have a bacon sandwich, as you can tell, and then like start at midday, and then just like just stay up far too late watching American sports, and then get up the next day and repeat. So you're
definitely not in the gym at 5 in the morning like me, are you?
Not in the gym. Like, it's just a nap. But that's, do you have something like that that's like your kind of escapism to get you in the zone or anything? Or do you just paint and that's it?
I think that the painting and the Warhammer hobbying in itself is my zone. That I just instantly sink into it. But if I'm having a rough day, I usually kind of start a mashup of the latest fucked up thing Trump has done with a mashup of thrash metal. You know what I mean? To really like beat the shit out of me to get.
Are you talking about the Trump metal, the Metal Trump channel on YouTube? Because it's amazing.
I don't even know what that is, but I don't know if I want to find out.
Well, basically, it's a guy who's taken Donald Trump in speeches and cut all his words together to the lyrics to heavy metal songs. You've got to check it out, man. It's amazing.
I do not want to hear that.
Metal Trump, it's amazing. Like, literally, they just did Tornado of Souls by Megadeth. It's amazing. But it's Metal Trump. It's a complete tangent. You definitely need to check it out. It's amazing. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the art background. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was artistic when I was young. And my grandfather was very artistic, and he taught us how to paint and stuff like that. And I did a lot of hobby stuff. But when I was at college and school, I didn't take art anywhere really. I did a bit of graphic design. I did an internship at a graphic design company. How important do you think it is? Because there's a lot of people who paint models, and they never ever really look at art theory or color theory or light and shadow, and there's some really good resources out there. Like I remember we went to Adepticon 2 years ago, and there was a chap there who had the I can't remember his name, I apologise, but he had the downed ATST in the swamp. It was like the ATST in a swamp, and we were sat in the airport and we had to delay, and he plonked it on the table. This is a long story, sorry, I'm going to get on a tangent. And he basically went, we talked to him and he saw it, and obviously because we're hobbyists, we're like, oh, we're nerds too, let's talk. He recommended a book called Colour and Light, which I use, and I think it's really good.
Bad boy.
Yeah, Terry's got
it. Yeah, it's a hand there.
Yeah, it's Gurney, right? Is that what the guy?
Yeah, and that one.
Yeah, I've got that too.
James Gurney, Imagine.
Yeah, I own both of those too.
It was Seth. Awesome. It was Martin. Thank you very much. It was Seth Armston. So thank you very much for putting that in the chat. It was definitely Seth. So appreciate that, Martin.
Cheers, Martin.
So
Seth. Right.
Yeah, it's top guy. So we didn't really know him, but we just started chatting at the airport, and that says you how much of a top guy he is. So how important do you think because I mean I know a lot of people ask me for advice and stuff, and I'm going to hold my hand up. I'm no expert, right? I just paint a lot of models. And there are some people out there that just know they have a sort of a natural affinity for colour, light, colour theory, shadow. How important is it, do you think, for somebody who wants to improve their painting to spend a little bit of time just looking at theory and this kind of background to give them the tools to make their miniatures really pop?
I mean, personally, for me, the most fun thing about painting Warhammer is color. That's just what I like to focus on in my work, is different colors, different lights, what the different colors do to each other, and all of that good things in between. I think the most important thing for every individual person who paints in this hobby is to do it for themselves and enjoy what they're doing and have fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
That's what she said.
If you want to improve, I think it's really, really important that you learn not just color, but mixing color. Because it opens up a whole new range of thinking about applying color to the miniature. Because if you're just using straight out the tube, then you're limited to what people are supplying you. But if you start mixing color, you're using what people are supplying you to elevate the art that you're executing, I guess, lack of a better word.
Yeah.
You can, but in sense of how to go about finding that information, I think is more of an interesting question for me. I think at this point, there's so many people who are putting out YouTube videos on, essentially, here is how you can use color theory in your hobby painting, rather than going to, and try to comprehend Joseph Albert's theory of color, who is the inventor of the modern way that we think about color. That's a little bit hefty, maybe, to like dive into something that large when you're new to it. So I think if you're trying to step into color, I think I would look into good painters that put up YouTube videos and watch YouTube tutorials. How are they talking about color? What are they doing with color? And what are they describing that's the reason for why they're doing these choices, essentially. That would be my recommendation for anybody who wants to step up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think Martin's asked a question about what do you think is important to think about as you grow as a painter, and I think it's kind of along that level, like going to a con or a tourney, see other people's stuff, what do you take away, and do you win an award or not? And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's something I've always said, even though some of my closest friends told me, not people on this call, but other people have told me I'm full of an animal product that shall not be described. But basically saying that it's you paint for yourself, right? It's a bit, and I'd kid it a lot. I've been looking at a lot of like fitness stuff, and basically it's like you when you go to a gym, it's a kind of very personal experience, and you're kind of competing with yourself. And I think that it's the same sort of thing where you're basically saying, look, I'm on a journey, and I start out, and the way that I approached my painting is kind of accidental. It wasn't planned. It wasn't like I'm going to be painting models when I'm 38 for a living. It was when I was a kid. I was like, I was like, right, I'm going to base coat, and I just base coat everything. And it was comfortable, and I got really good at base coat, and I base coated everything. Then I learned how to use inks, and then I used inks on everything. And then I learned dry brushing. I dry brushed everything. Did my way was it just dry brushed? And then I kind of got that foundation of fundamental techniques down at a young age, which was when there was a tipping point. When I got back into the hobby, one of the things that I was always too scared to do when I was younger, I remember I had like a Goblin unit, and the GW manager at the time, when it just opened, showed me how to base coat, put the green ink on, and reapply the Goblin green, and then not go in the recesses. And then the next stage was the sunburst yellow Goblin green highlight, and this was a long time ago. I'm not going to tell how old I am, but but basically I was like, okay, so highlighting, that's too scary for me at that age, and I just didn't do it, and I didn't push myself. And then when I got back into the hobby, like I highlighted, I did a Tomb King army, and I literally, it was like, I remember the first night that I got it was really retarded. I was painting like tomb swarms, like the metal bugs on a thing, and I think I started painting at 10 in the night, and I went till 6 in the morning because I got in the zone, and I was just like, paint. It's just like, I haven't painted for years, and I'm loving it. And I mixed white into everything to highlight it, and then you start playing around with like, what if you use grey, what if you use a cream, what if you do that, and then what I found was there was this whole group of people that have been painting, and they all had their own way of doing things, and they all had their own techniques or their own. And this is before there was a lot of medium. Now there's so many products, like. And like you say, like you're restricted to what people supply you. Back in the day when I was painting, like you literally didn't have these lovely mid-earthy tones and all these kind of neutral, desaturated colours. You just had red, blue, yellow. It was like, it's red or it's yellow. And I found that what's really good...
And none of it covered.
No.
None of it covered.
And none of it, yellow was like you couldn't paint it, could you?
So everyone painted yellow with
like,
bone and yellow ink. So it's...
it was... I think Keith Robertson showed me when he was in Gloucester store before he moved somewhere else, like the heavy metal guy, and he was just like, no, you paint it all bronzed flesh. So you like bronze flesh was the color, and he goes, you water down bronze flesh and you paint it all bronze flesh, and then sunburst yellow goes straight over it. And I'm like, oh, and it's just like little tricks that you learn in the trade, don't you? Like back in the day, whereas like Russ was saying, then it's just like it was literally blood red gore, yellow, goblin green, dark angel green, and that was it. Like
go faster red back in the day, the creature.
Yeah, was green ink.
It's worm purple, all those lovely colours. But from my understanding, like because I know you said about like you see mix and you go outside of this band that you're almost restricted by the bands you have, but now with modern products there are so many. Like you look at the new GW paint system, and there literally are all the mixed colours, and I know you can take it to the next level by mixing these things together. I think it's really interesting that you're like, mix, because you find the hues and tones that aren't available to everyone else. So it's a bit like the hack that someone looks at your miniature and goes, that looks so different and good, because nobody else is recreating that, because you've created that color palette, right? So there's no way someone can't just go, well, it's these 4 colors in a row with a wash. Anyone can, and it's just how technically well you apply that. Whereas once you start pushing colour in different directions, you're saying, actually, I found this tonal colour that is only available by mixing these 3 paints in this certain way. And that's really interesting to me in terms of being unique, I guess. So in that sense, I'm sort of rambling a bit, but do you think for competition painting or trying to enter into competitions, it's really important to be unique by using colour in that way, or do you think it's more about technical execution, or do you think it's a combination of both?
Well, to clarify a little bit, I think that when it comes to color and mixing color, it's not so much as finding one color that looks different or unique. It's more about finding color relationships that does something. It creates, there's this, obvious ones, for example, that I think most of us have seen, those kind of like illusion, vibrancy, color combinations online, where you have like a very specific type of orange and a very specific type of teal, and all of a sudden the colors on the wall start going like this. It just pumps, it vibrates. Literally, that's what your eyes are perceiving. And that's not necessarily the only way to create colors where something's happened. There's a sense of it factor, and sometimes it's really hard to hit that combination. And I think that most of us who've painted have at some point had that moment like, wow, these two colors look so good. Like this color scheme is just so good,
Yeah.
And and that's so when you're mixing color, it's like you find this red, for example, that you really really like, and then you're trying to find a cream or whatever color that you're into to sort of pair it with. But that cream comes in thousands of different combinations, right? Because it can be a darker cream, it can be a lighter cream, it can be a more cream that goes towards green, it can be a cream that goes towards yellow, etc., right? So that finding that sort of combination can really elevate your art, especially in competitions. But I think that when you get to that, I mean, that is a very sort of nitpicky aspect of the hobby, and you can't necessarily rely on that by itself. You need to have all of these other techniques and applications and conceptual ideas that needs to correlate with that specific color combination. So, I definitely think that having a good sense of color helps you immensely when it comes to doing well in painting competition, whether it's Golden Demons, and I'm sure Terry can agree with me on that. Since he has such a fantastic concept of colors. I mean, I've seen Terry's work in person, and I mean, it's just phenomenal. That magenta that you've been using with the green for the Nurgle. I mean, to me, that's one of those examples of finding two colors that just looks really well together, and
they shouldn't go together as well. You're putting green next to bright pink, and it works.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and it's because I believe, and all of this artistic crap is very subjective, right? But yeah. I believe that it's because of what type of magenta and what type of green.
Yeah.
That there's, if you go towards a different green, it can look awful. So yeah. That's why you're sort of mixing.
Well, yeah, it's a very desaturated green next to a very saturated pink purple, so it works. I think if you used a really saturated green, like, classic sort of snot green looking bright green next to that, it would look pretty garish, I would imagine.
But then again, then you have Louise Sugden who makes that work,
Well, she paints everything with like UV color, so and it works.
It's crazy. Amazing.
So,
it is amazing.
So it's like I think it's that a little bit of like making things, you tweak things until it works. I think.
I agree with that.
It's really interesting to hear you guys talk about all this stuff, because and I've been quite open about it. Is that I'm red green colorblind, and I always really struggle with how I've painted stuff because of that. So even with my Stormcast Eternal, like my Celestial Vindicators, like the turquoise is more blue, and the red that is more brown and magenta, because then I can tell that they're different. Whereas if you were to paint if it was the same tonality, I just get lost. And and a couple of times, I think even certain other colors, like Terry's posted a picture in our chat, and he's had too much. I think it was the orange of his wet palette. I just can't.
Yeah, it's the wet palette lid. It's bright orange.
I just can't see anything now. Like all I can see is that orange just completely destroys everything that you're trying to show me in that picture. Can you move the model and put it somewhere else? Just so that I can see it. But it's really interesting, because that's something that I've always struggled with. So obviously it's I read the words and I understand the color theory from talking to the guys, but like you said, a lot of it's subjective, and I do a lot of it by feel, if that makes sense. What you were saying with sometimes you tweak things to get it right, which is why every single one of my armies that I've ever painted is cold, because I just keep it in that palette, because then I can see what the color is, if that makes sense, instead of it being But yeah, it's
interesting to hear, because it's one of those things you have to find a strategy that works for you. And in your case, it's very fascinating to hear that you kind of, tweak it to make it work for you. That's very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so that I can see. I can remember when we talked about my Celestial Vindicators, and I think it was me, but I think all four of us were on the call. We used to spend a lot of time talking, and it was just I mixed my Celestial Vindicator turquoise as a mixed color, which has got a lot of French blue from Valio in it, and sky blue as a mix, because I couldn't. As soon as you use Pterodon, I can't think of it, Sotek green and then sort of the GW reds, it just messes my head up, which is why I'd gone more into that blue spectrum with the turquoise, and then more into sort of sanguine base P3, which is more of that ruddy burgundy red, instead of it being your classic corn bloodletter. It just really I just find it a real struggle then. I know I can paint red and green together because I understand from reading heavy metal guides and different people that like to highlight red. You corn, you shade down, you then highlight up, and then you place that next to a green, like with my Dark Angels, and it looks right because that's what it is. But it's not something that I naturally gravitate towards, because it just it's such a struggle for me to differentiate between the two.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own different methods and journeys of picking colours, don't they? Oscar, so your Stormcast, for example, how did you pick those colours? Did that happen gradually? Did you have an idea? Did you have a source of inspiration? How did things kind of settle on the scheme that you ended up with, both the models, the metals, the base, the lot?
The Stormcast was a little bit of an experimental project for me, because I wanted to not only learn how to paint non-metallic metal to a certain extent, but also to do something that I hadn't necessarily seen before, which is almost a full army of just non-metallic metal, because there isn't really much more than metals and a couple of flaps of cloth on these guys, right? Especially the old cast models.
Yeah.
But the way that I went about it was to look at other painters that had painted non-metallic metal and dissect what kind of colors they're using, and take what I liked from it and replace it with things from necessarily other painters, and incorporate those into a recipe that not only would be easier to use, but also had more of a tonal feel to me. I like things when you punch things from a desaturated ground to a more saturated finish. I think that adds contrast to a model, which is beneficial, because contrast is essentially what makes models look good. As a core concept.
That's what I love about your Stormcast, is that the way you push that contrast. I really like that's one of the things that initially drew me to it, because you almost from black right up to I can't the pure sort of almost like white highlight, and it just really that sort of super graphic black to the highest point contrast really appeals to me on a personal level. So it's this was that intentional? Obviously you just said you liked that. Did you want to push the contrast as much as you could, because that's what makes it pop almost?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're painting something metallic, and there's obviously tons of different types of metal approaches to non-metallic metal, right? You have some painters that like to paint more of a muted, beat up, weathered type metal, and then you have other people who like that sort of chrome style. I think that when you're trying to do an army in non-metallic metal, you have to consider that you are most of the time, you and the viewers and your opponents are mostly going to be at arm's length away from the army, if not more, which means that you have to adapt the way that you paint to work with that concept in mind. So for the non-metallic metal, I think if I would have gone for a more muted metal, it wouldn't have looked as striking from a distance. So it was a conscious decision to go from very dark to very light. So I went for a more of a chrome-ish kind of look, but at the same time, I also had to dumb the technique down to make sure that it was simplified enough to where I didn't lose the core principal properties that you need to be able to convey the illusion of metal, as well as being easy enough to paint so that I could play with it within 6 months, because that's the amount of time that I took to paint it, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if I just sit and wet blend and glaze and wet blend and glaze and just kind of go over and over and over again and spend 50 hours on a leg, then I won't be playing this army until 2030. So it was a lot of combinations that made me make the decisions that went for that army. And I remember Byron was asking me a couple of questions at Warhammer World when I was there with the army. It was some of the decisions that I had made. And I remember one of my answers was, I had to cut corners. I had to cut some corners. Otherwise, it would just never be done if I started getting nitpicky about all of these things. So that's, yeah.
We always used to say, like, finished is better than not finished. Painted's better than not painted. Sometimes you've got to...
Can't be perfect if it's not done, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting because I'm kind of more of an army painter, and I know that we've been really fortunate, and where the podcast was birthed really was from Skype chats and sharing hobby advice between the four of us, and we've all influenced each other's painting in one way, shape or form. One of the things that was really influential for me was I had an ex-heavy metal painter where I worked at a different miniatures company from GW, and he was there, and he showed me how to do multiple glaze blending, building up the opacity on actually War Machine models for the sort of the Everblight models, which was essentially became the palette that I used for my warrior army. But the way that he painted was very high level commission or competition, so he's won Euro Militaire and things like that. So he was so AD was really good at this really high end painting. And what I did is gleaned the kind of the method and dumbed it down to do it for an army level, and applied that. And that's probably, I'd say it's one of the things that really accelerated my skill level in painting, in terms of for an army. For AOS it's kind of been a bit weird because all I've done really is quick to the table stuff that's just done. So do you, when you do a project, and I guess you kind of touched on it already, so you do a new project, say it's an army or a Necromunda gang or something like that, do you try something new every time? Is there something that, is it like a technique or a method or a look that gets you the excitement for the project, or is it more about you want to paint those models and you use stuff from your arsenal of techniques you've used and it's just a replication of that? Or do you always try and find a new thing? I find that I'm always looking for a new thing to try out, whether it's a medium or a new product or a new way of painting I've not done before, and that's where I get my enjoyment.
Every single time I paint something personal, I try something new. Or it's something that I feel like I'm lacking at, like something I want to try to get better at, and I use that opportunity to practice it.
Yeah.
So for the Stormcast army, it was non-metallic metal, and for the Nurgle army, I was trying to do more of a corroded version of. Sorry, did I say something?
No, I was going to say you were doing rust, weren't you? I remember talking to you, and you said you wanted to really push worn metal and corrosion and rust in the Nurgle.
Yes,
so that's what you did for that one.
So it was the sort of corroded non-metallic metal, but I also wanted to try to do more kit bash and push a little bit of the sculpting aspects of that army. So I worked with several different things on the Nurgle army, which is also why it took longer than the Stormcast army. But one of the things, for example, was, like you said, the corroded non-metallic metal. I also worked on sculpting. I also wanted to try to do something with resin. So the display board for the Nurgle is about 70 ounces of tape cleared high gloss table resin mixed with blood for the blood god, just poured layer after layer after layer. And a really fun thing that happened. This was oh man, I poured this I think 2 days before I was leaving for Nova Open. And if this display board doesn't work out, I'm screwed. You know? And
It doesn't
so
dry.
I had this. Right. So it was actually resin that was going to cure fairly fast, and I did very slow layers. I'd already been pouring a lot over top for weeks essentially. But what I had to do was I had a wooden frame, and in order for the water or the blood water to sit inside of the frame without having a lip to it, without having a thickness to the border, I had to Dremel very, very carefully to make a thin point of that edge there. And I had by mistaken Dremeled a little bit lower on just a little gash. So when I was pouring this final layer, it just kept pouring out of that little tiny spout on one side. And at that point, you're just standing and it's pouring and it's running, and you just have to kind of, keep pushing up something, keep trying to silver tape it to sort of like keep it from not running out. And it was, that was a fun, that was a fun little project to do. But yeah, so every single time I try to do something new. And for this Cal Jericho model that I'm painting right now, I really wanted to try to work a little bit more on glazing and work on face. To paint the face with character. So, every single time.
How did you get on at Nova Open with the Nurgle in the painting? Did you win?
How I did with the Nurgle at Nova Open last year?
In the painting.
Yeah, I took home the best painted and for the doubles as well. So both in GT and doubles.
Nice.
Yeah, well deserved.
Yeah, the doubles I won with Kelly Freeborg. Who painted and custom sculpted almost a amazing looking female Nagash model.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen that.
Yeah.
She did a great job on that sculpt. That looked amazing.
That's good.
So I was going to ask you, in terms of medium, like some of the things that I've been like fascinated by recently, and it's kind of something that I want to delve into a bit more and do, and I'm thinking about this grimdark 40k style and applying it to Age of Sigmar, because you don't really see it, and I kind of see Age of Sigmar as quite a dark and grim place, which is why it appeals to me so much. Have you experimented with oils or any of those mediums, or do you just stick to acrylic, or is it stuff like your kind of your enamel washes and those kind of historical weathering and those kind of techniques? Is that something you've played around with, or have you not had that sort of journey yet?
I painted oil portraits at university.
Yeah.
So I used to work in oils. I still have all my oil colors, my brushes, and all that stuff. Now, it's a little bit of difference. Usually, I haven't tried the oil colors that are being sold for miniature paintings. I feel more drawn to the acrylics, but I'm definitely not opposed to trying it one day. I think it's really good to try everything at least once in order to kind of feel out and see how it works.
Yes, interesting.
But I have tried the enamel stuff, and I just ordered some more of the enamel streak stuff from MIG.
Yeah.
Yep. Stuff like that, and just stock up on a few things, and because I really want to get more grimy with that on my Necromunda board that I'm building for myself.
It's exactly what I'm using it for my Cawdor, and I've been using it on my Necrons. So it's definitely been an experience. I watched a really good video, but I'm going to completely say it's wrong. It's like Xatakoskan Miniatures or something like that. But he basically does this Grimdark Compendium 3 videos where he basically has a sheet of card, and he'll paint it in loads of different oils, and he's like showing you like putting like white spirit over it, or mineral spirit for you guys, or chucking like really like isopropyl alcohol, or like and he just said this is how it behaves. This will take it off. This won't take it off. If you scrub it this hard, it will come off. If you do it with this, it won't. And it's this is how you reactivate it. This is how you seal it. This is how much playtime you've got. And it was really interesting because so many of the myths that you hear are like, oh, you can't mix the two and all this, and actually it's complete rubbish. And it was really for me, that gave me it got me over the hurdle to give it a go, because I think sometimes, and I noticed that Sean's put in the thing that highlighting is too scary for him. I think sometimes you need that that encouragement to do the thing that pushes you. It's out of your comfort zone.
Yep.
But that's the only way you're going to grow, right? So it's super. Right. I think it's super important to have a creative person to always be looking to push yourself in whatever you do, whether that's gaming or painting. But essentially, like going, well, actually, I need to paint. I want to be better at painting, but you're never gonna grow if you don't experiment. And I think experimentation is such an important part of improving your painting. And I just wanted to say to you, like, how far down the rabbit hole do you go with that, or do you have those things? Well, this is how I'm going to paint my leather because I know it just works. Because I find when I do a project, right, I tend to keep enough of it similar and familiar, and go, I'm going to concentrate on this one extra thing. Because if you try to do like 5 new things, it could just be a complete disaster, right? I mean, how do you approach that? Do you kind of moderate your experimentation, or you kind of like just go for it?
It depends on the project. I mean, at this point in time, you know, it's one of those things where having a limited amount of time to do my personal projects also limits a little bit of how much experimentation I can do at this time. That's why whenever I do try to do a project, I always try to learn something new or progress my skills in one area by trying something new or applying something new. Because when I do my work for my clients, that definitely is one of those areas where they come to me because they know what they're gonna get to some extent, and I don't want to necessarily spring a bunch of experimental projects on them. You know what I mean? Like, they have an idea of what they want. They have an aesthetic that they like, and I sort of fit within that box of what they're expecting to get from me. So I think that, you know, when it comes to rabbit holes, I'm one of those people. I like to go all the way if possible. But time is essentially what restricts me a lot of times to really get in there. But I definitely want to, as soon as these streaking grimes come in, I think that's one of those things I'm going to experiment quite a lot with.
You should definitely. It's awesome. It's very matte, but it's a lot of fun. I've only done one model now. I sound like an expert, right? But I've watched videos, so that makes me an expert, because that's how it works, right?
Always, right? Yeah.
I watched the video, and I know everything. I just regurgitate the content, and I sound like I know what
I've seen one stage of it do ridiculous stuff. So I did a dry brushing lesson with someone who's very proficient in streaking grime, Facehammer. I sat down and I gave him a dry brushing lesson. We had 2 identical looking pieces of scenery, and he took it away and did streaking grime to it, and then sent me pictures like, God, take me through your stages. And he was like, there's one stage.
Yeah.
And you
spray it on with an airbrush, take it off with mineral spirit, done.
Yep, and his thing was put it on 20 minutes before you take it off.
Yeah.
That was his like little nuance to it. But Oscar, I was going to ask you, you've said like streaking grime and stuff like that. What are your I tend to admire things in other painters that I find I'm not very good at myself, and they're the things that I often try and get better at. So like I'll try and do an ogre army because I'm not very good at flesh, that type of thing. What are your things that you've got on your radar in the future, or that you respect in other painters because you find them difficult yourself?
I think one of the things that I've been looking a lot at right now has been to make terrain. That's something that I've been trying to get. I did. This was last fall, so after Nova Open, I did an Age of Sigmar table where I really tried to step up the game, because normally when I do terrain for my local game store, Battlegrounds, I do them so they last. So I do, for example, a 3-step hill, and then I sand it all so it kind of cements the foam in, and then it's mounted on an MDF board, it's a masonite or something like that, and then I just put a thick coat of paint on it, and I dry brush it, and maybe I put some flock on it if I feel like it, and then that's it, you know. Because that way, you know, when people bang around on it for a few years, there's minor chipping, but it doesn't break to some extent. But with this project, I really tried to, you know, I had some 3D buildings printed by Crazy Horse on Twitter, Anthony, and sort of tried to utilize that, where I also used a lot of flock, a lot of rocks and grime and dirt and things like that to kind of throw in and get a little bit more feeling to the scenery. And with this Necrobunda board, it's definitely something that I'm trying to explore and learn new techniques. I've been looking at a lot of tutorials by train modelers that have been doing things like rust techniques and different ways of approaching that. The way that they're scratch building things from just shit that you find in an alleyway, so that you can kind of get real cheap. But also really trying to get better at looking at a cohesive, because I think that the general Warhammer style of painting and doing the hobby is a very sort of middle of the line, essentially. It uses saturated colors, it uses pure colors, it mixes some colors, it has a little bit of light, but it's mostly just kind of like apply the paint to the model and have fun with it. But then there are these grim dark, where it's just like very it's supposed to be dirty and grimy and things like that. And then you have those kind of like on the opposite end, you have those things that are very conceptual, where it's just like it's very minimal, it's very clean, it's just very stylish in some extent. So I think that I gravitate a lot towards the center of that line because of I started so young. The only way I could get inspiration to paint these models and learn how to paint them was to look at White Dwarf. That was the material. Yeah. There weren't any YouTubes around.
No.
I couldn't find any YouTube tutorials on how to do this shit because this was back in the 90s. You know what I mean?
Don't remind me.
So I gravitate towards that. When it comes to these, this sort of, more of like AOS 28 and things like that. My personal opinion about it, I don't feel excited about doing that stuff, but I think that there's a lot of knowledge that can be gained from it because the guys that are doing it are very passionate about what they're doing, and it's a very particular style, and the style that they've grown to create it is a very impressive thing that they are producing. It's just necessarily not aligning with my aesthetical purposes.
No. It's like that blanch stuff, isn't it? Because I know I see a lot of the Inquisitor 28 scale stuff, and that's all like really funky conversions, and it's all like Blanchitsu stuff, and and I really respect that stuff, but it just doesn't appeal to me like at all. I'm like you. It's like I was brought up with White Dwarf and heavy metal painting, and that to me is the top of the pyramid, and that's kind of like what I look at. But at the same time, it is. I've never really pushed myself into that direction to do all of those like Blanchitsu conversions and the grimy, dirty sort of like that look. So like fair play to sort of like go down that route and try and sort of like find a way to like put that into your hobby, like with like following the the YouTube tutorials on the model train guys. That's something that perhaps I need to do more, and it's like it's one of the things that like I was going to say is like, and I'm sure Russ like maybe touched on it earlier on, is that like just because like for me personally it's like I paint in a specific style, and that's like it's like I don't like aesthetically, I don't like stuff that isn't in a similar style, which is like it's how I am. It's like, how important do you think it is to just throw away that and just really go like completely out there? Like, so, I don't paint like Russ. I couldn't paint like Russ, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I shouldn't paint like Russ. And it's the same with it's like, how important do you think it would be to just completely throw all of your preconceptions out the window and just go, right, I'm going to do something completely abstract now, that just as a learning process? Do you think that's something that you bring to your own hobby personally? Maybe not for a client, I guess, but
right. No, I think it's very important to separate, what is your aesthetical preferences and what are things that you just straight up don't like. I think it's important to be true to yourself on that, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not insulting anybody by having opinions and dislikes and likes. But I think that if you don't engage and explore and take an interest in what they're doing, I think that there's a lot of tricks that you are missing. And that's, and also I can't tell people to go explore color. It's a missed opportunity if you don't. And then I don't want to engage with anything that isn't color. And I can't be that hypocritical.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are things that you can go to AOS 28 or Inquisitor 28 or Blanchette or that kind of style, or to even concept styles and look at things, or even things that you might not have seen yet and stumble upon. You go to train modelers, and oftentimes, I always had an opinion that wasn't really much built to it, because I never engaged with that community. And then I ended up watching a few videos, and I was just like, wow, they are building everything. I had this completely backward. And
have you seen,
just engaging with those videos for a little bit, you learn so much, because these guys, they are so passionate about crafting almost everything from scratch, using plaster molds and, cutting carpets, and, it's everything. It's everything. So I really recommend everyone having an open mind to things that they don't necessarily aesthetically align with. Having, even if you run into someone that you befriend, it's a great opportunity to ask a lot of questions about that style, because there might be something an aspect of it that you do like about it. For example, the 28 kind of community, I really, really like the sculpts that they are doing. For example, I think their conversions are absolutely amazing. When it comes to a lot of people that I see that are painting them, they're oftentimes painted in a style where the materials and the different parts of the miniatures aren't identified enough for me, because that's something that I like to do. I like to identify different materials and different colors and kind of color play a lot. So the style of painting doesn't align, but I would love to paint one of their sculpts that some of these guys are doing, because they're absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question, at least.
Of course, dude. Yeah, no problem, man. It's just good to know.
I think
it is. Have you seen Night Shift's work on YouTube?
Maybe. I am terrible with names. I'm very good with pictures.
Okay, I just linked it in general chat. He does some incredible stuff. His weathering is off the hook. It's absolutely amazing, and he's one of some of his videos have got 1 million views, and it's like how to weather a tank or whatever. And he's super interesting for just graphic levels of competency at military stuff. So I'll link that in the chat, as well as the before and the after of what one layer of streak and grime can do to a dry brush building is also in the chat now. Yeah.
I am definitely going to check out that link. I really appreciate that. I'm very curious now, but I maybe should hold off until this segment is over.
I think
you can't tempt me like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, here's this thing, don't look at it. So just as I appreciate we're sort of over the hour now, but I just wanted to ask you one question, and it might be a difficult one. What is your
favourite base rim, and why is it black?
Why is it not gold? No, that's not a question. So, what are your sort of top 5 products that you think every hobbyist should own? And that could be colours, it could be palettes, whatever.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I am very big proponent of wet palettes. I think that I have a hard time painting without a wet palette at this point.
I love a good wet palette.
It's something that not only does it help to keep your paint in a good condition for longer as you paint, it also keeps it's easier to mix on, because the mix lasts longer as well. But it also saves money, because there are not all paints last overnight, but some paints do, where you can essentially just mix them back up and apply them again. And that I think is a really valuable thing, not just economically, but environmentally too, to really be aware of the products that you're wasting as you're painting, and a wet palette really helps with that, I think. Especially good palettes, and I've been using the Redgrass brand since they kickstarted several years ago.
Yeah.
And
we've all got one in front of us.
They are slim, they are nice, they're easy to transport, the papers last really well, and they continue to enhance their products, which is very, very important for a brand to do. Because I remember they started with one thing, they are not at that place anymore. Like their papers that they have are better, their painting handles they just improved. I like companies like that because they are aware of what the community is looking for, and they are eager to supply that to the community, not just come up with a product, take all the money, and bounce. I think
so. You don't like Army Painters rip-off?
I'm going to end it with a palette right there. But I think brush soap, very, very important too. You know, if you take care of your brushes will take care of you.
Do you clean your brushes after every session?
Not after every session, since I work, 40 to 60 hours a week. But I clean them after most sessions. I do.
Yeah, I think I do mine like every other day.
Yeah. I think it's also one of those things where it's important to just kind of know what you're doing with the brush. If I'm using metallics on a brush, I generally try to clean it after I'm done with the metallics, just to get those out of there so that they're not drying into the brush.
Yeah.
But if I'm just using like a smooth gel-based paint, kind of acrylic stuff, and I just rinse it out really well, I can clean it tomorrow. That's fine. It doesn't have to be anything crazy rule-wise. Another medium that I think is really important is airbrush flow improvement. That has become a little bit of a holy grail for me. I mix in a little bit of airbrush flow improver into all my paints as I use them. Essentially, when I start with a pot or the dropper bottle, I pop it open, I mix in a little bit of that, and I pump it back, the cork back on, and I shake it up, and then I use it. And the reason why I do that is because the airbrush flow improver includes a little bit of what's called a retarder medium. And a retarder medium is a medium that prevents or it aids to slow the drying process a little. And I find that works really, really well with a wet palette. It also works really, really well when you're painting on a model, especially if you're painting in more hotter conditions or, drier conditions, as like in an AC controlled studio space, where you have a little blow of circulation and stuff like that. It also helps to when you're trying to blend things, because you have a little bit more time. You're not just putting the paint on the model and then it's dry and then you're just like, shit, like you can actually put a little bit of paint on a model, you can put the next paint on, and you can take another brush and you can start blending the two together. So it starts to nudge a little bit of the acrylic paints towards more of an oil characteristic, where you have a lot more time to blend and things like that.
Are you not a brush licker?
Oh, I am consuming brush water. Oh my god, I don't even want to think about. I am a brush licker.
Chemicals in your paints and then licking the brush.
It's too late, anyways. I don't lick oil brush. No, I am staying away from that.
Because I know someone that paints that was putting sort of flow improver and stuff in their mixes, and they got really sick.
Unfortunately, I'm sure I'm gonna get there at some point. I think at this point I've already screwed myself.
You've consumed enough.
But
it's
I washed
fine.
my brushes out really well before that, and I changed my water quite frequently.
Yeah, I'm a brush licker. It's like... okay, so anything else you'd recommend, like over those flow improver, wet palette, those sort of things?
Brush soap.
These things are quite basic. I'm sure that some of the other professional painters like Mengel might have some other things that he likes to play around with. But another thing that I really, really like is making sure you have a good painting handle. And there's quite a few brands out right now that are producing good painting handles. I like both the Citadel and the Redgrass painting handles for, they kind of have different properties to it. The Redgrass I like to utilize when I'm doing just a single model that's quite small, like a less than like a 32 millimeter base or smaller. The GW I'm more a fan of when it comes to like more robust, like 40 mil and up, because they can hold them more stably and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think having that, especially when you're painting something that you're passionate about, and when you're touching around in the model, even if you wash your hands regularly, because it's 2020, you still have oils that kind of come through in your fingers, and when that gets on the model, it can give you complications in the future. And avoiding those complications, like scraping off paint, or I airbrush and then I go back to painting, and then I airbrush again and I go back to painting, and there's always a little bit of residue that maybe sits on the finger, even if I'm wearing gloves or whatever. And when that gets on that model and you have to repaint a fully blended surface, man, that just blows.
Yeah.
So
I know when I was painting my Archeon, there's just no way to hold him. So like I was wearing like latex gloves whilst painting him, just so everyone, I was sending like work in progress pictures to people, and they're like, "Why have you got bright orange like latex gloves on?" And I'm like, "Because they were the ones at the time at work that I could get for free." And I was just like, there, and it's just even then, like I agree. Like if you can get, it's one of the downsides of the big models, right? Is like the fact that you almost have to handle them at some point, and then you start rubbing because of like the pressure points on like your thumb and your forefingers, and you end up rubbing off like bits that you think you've spent ages painting horns or like tips, and then like you're like, oh right, okay, go back and repaint it again. It's frustrating in the extreme.
Yeah, it's happened to me so many times. At this point, I'm just trying to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah. It is difficult. I can remember I did a Land Raider recently, and it was there's just no way you can actually paint it without holding it. And I can remember I did the entire thing, and then as I finished, I pulled my hand away, and I left a great big thumbprint sort of like on the bottom half of it, and it was an Imperial Fist one. And I had to like repaint the entire bottom half of the tank, and I was just like, no, it was just. Yeah, it's very frustrating in the extreme. It's like lessons learned: always wear gloves when holding a big model, or handle it as little as you possibly can.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
Awesome,
amazing.
So cool.
Okay, well,
I think that.
Yeah. I think that's probably enough painting talk, but I'd really appreciate you coming on. It's been absolutely amazing to hear your thoughts and enlightening as well. So I would say if you check out Oscar's channel and support him. Do you have a Patreon or anything like that you do?
Yeah. I do have a Patreon. I will link it in the general chat. But everything that I have is always Oscar Lars. So it's easy to remember. If you're looking for a Patreon, you search for Oscar Lars. If you're looking for my website, search for Oscar Lars. If you're looking for YouTube, Oscar Lars. Instagram, Twitter,
easy,
same
right?
thing. Yeah, I mean, it's just,
it's the brand.
It's easy is good.
Yeah. But I'd say, if you want to hear more of Oscar's sort of thoughts and see some of his amazing work, then go check it out and support, because it's... I think that the amount of time to create the content and put it out there and spread this knowledge is a lot of time, and I think that it's great that people go out there and create this content, so it's great to support those. So I say thank you very much for coming on our sort of fledgling tentative baby steps into YouTube and things like that, and this live event where we're streaming to a small group, but we like to think it's people are enjoying the content. So I know Ben Johnson said he could listen to you talk colour all day, so that was in the talk for that. So I just want to say thank you very
nice
much.
Compliment.
Yeah, and thank you very much for coming on, and thanks for everyone who's watching, and we'll speak to you soon.
An absolute pleasure, dude.
So much for having me.
No worries, anytime.
Thank you.